All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Radical Health. I'm your host, Seth. And on this show, we discuss all things related to health, especially that which may seem radical to the Western mind. Today, we are discussing a particular aspect of our natural world that I find infinitely fascinating. It's often viewed by people, however, in the scientific and religious communities as inconsequential, nonsensical, or worse. And it's seen by others as one of the most defining and important dynamics of our planetary system. And this subject, of course, is astrology, the science of the luminaries. We're also going to get into hidden cosmology, earth physics, astrotheology, and more. And I'm happy to have a distinguished guest with us who will help us unpack this amazingly rich study. And he is none other than astrologer, YouTuber, co-host with Dr. Narco Longo of the Casting Couch Astrology podcast, and wise wizard himself, Merlin. So Merlin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Seth. I really appreciate the invite. And there is a tremendous overlap between astrologers, alternative cosmologists, and natural health practitioners. So I think there will be a lot of interest from your audience in this subject, because I really think that astrology is so viewed as a pseudoscience, and vegetarianism and veganism is often maligned by people who know nothing about it. You know, you'll hear those things like, oh, you need your protein. Oh, don't you need to eat meat? So both of these subjects take a certain kind of inner fortitude in order to really embrace. You know, you have to really trust yourself and, you know, your channel, the school of unlearning. You do have to unlearn and relearn things to really understand these things properly.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I also see the two disciplines, natural health and astrology, as calling upon the natural world, you know, reflecting back to ourselves and learning as much as we can about what is here naturally and the energies that are here naturally, as opposed to the matrix, which is overlaid on top of that, convincing everyone to do stuff that is out of alignment. So yeah, that's a great introduction. And actually, I got a spicy question for you right off the bat, because I know a lot of people consider, you know, reading of the stars to be demonic, satanic, you know, anti-Christian. And I want to know, is astrology demonic?
I think absolutely not, because all you have to ask yourself is, who made the stars? Probably not the devil. You know, I think God created the stars and he put them there for a reason. You know, people like point to Genesis. You know, God put there the stars there, you know, for signs and for seasons. And then there are so many other biblical passages that refer to a proper understanding of the stars. You know, in the book of Job, God chastises Job and says, Job, can you call forth the Pleiades? Can you bind the belts or loose the belts of Orion, right? So God, in my opinion, and the stars are so beautiful, so wonderful, and there's so much to them, because you can use them for navigation, right? Like you can use the North Star to find north. You can use Orion's belt. Many people don't know this, but Orion's belt, the lead star Mintaka on Orion's belt, it's actually always directly on the equator. Just like how Polaris, the North Star, is always directly north, the lead star Orion's belt literally just circles the equator. It's like a fraction of a minute off of the equator. It's so it's like not direct, but it's so close that like Orion's belt is literally put there to help you find due east, right? So the stars can physically help you find your direction, but then on a deeper spiritual level, astrology can help you find your direction by learning your birth chart, by maybe casting a horary chart and stuff like that. So I don't think that's demonic at all. And I think that a lot of people who do find it to be, or do think it's demonic based on scripture especially, I would personally argue that that is more of a cherry picking. You know, I think it's best to take a look at what those specific verses are talking about and then look at the chapter as a whole. And then I think most people would agree that it's really not a critique of astrology. At best, it's a critique of astrology if it's misused, right? Like the Bible does say, beware fortune tellers, beware soothsayers, beware of sorcerers, right? Stuff like that. And of course, there's the interpretation of, you know, sorcerer means pharmakia, which is like modern pharmaceuticals, right? But then it also like is like, yeah, you should beware of people. Like, beware, there are fraudsters out there. There are people who misuse astrology. So you need to find an astrologer that you trust and one that you vibe with, I think, to really get a good reading, in my humble opinion.
Nice. And I'd like to think too that we don't necessarily, um, need an astrologer to make sense out of the energies of the luminaries. And that, what I want to do, one of my goals here today is to promote and develop for our listeners astrological literacy. Just being able to speak about it and understand what is going on up there. And I love what you said about, reading these scriptural passages in context and looking at the whole chapter, because, the very first chapter of the very first book of the Bible, Genesis 1, it draws this natural health and vegetarian aspect with this astrological luminary aspect, and it's totally combined. I mean, right in between where God is creating the grass and the seed and the fruit trees, and then he creates the firmament and the lights in the heavens, and it divides the day from the night, and there's a greater light and a lesser light to rule the night, and he called all these things good, and then he made humans and animals and all the food for us and called it good, and that's how the chapter ends. And it's like, all this stuff is good. We shouldn't be afraid of being able to talk about what's the sun doing, what's the moon doing, what is Mars and Venus doing, the wandering stars. So, yeah, in the spirit of promoting and developing astrological literacy, why do you think it's important to be able to talk about this science?
I think it's important because in modern days, especially, we've really lost. Think about how much atheism has exploded recently. I really love the short you did for like, are you suffering from atheism? That was hilarious.
Thank
But
you.
atheism really has exploded, and it's been recent. Most people were theists of some sort. And for me, at least, a studying of the stars, and as I, got deeper and deeper into it and got better and better at it, like a true understanding, it's like, it's so intelligent, it's so beautiful. And just for me specifically, like, knowing what I know now, intelligent design is undeniable. Like, you can see intelligent design in so many different things though, right? Like, you can look at a flower and go, wow, God made that so perfect. Or a human, like, wow, we're created in God's image, it's so perfect. And then look at the stars and how their patterns are, and they're so perfect. And there's been such a corruption of what the stars are, what they mean. They've been demonized by these church institutions, but then also complete things trying to mislead people by what we would consider mainstream science and stuff like that. So yeah, I guess the reason for astrological literacy, at least for me, is a connection to God. And if you want to strengthen your connection to God, and again, like, people can connect to God in so many different ways, so you don't need astrology. But if you wanted to enhance or accent, or, not, I don't want to say test, but find another way to connect to God, I do think that the patterns he left in the stars is a great way to do it.
Beautiful. Yeah. I mean, I find a lot of fulfillment and spiritual fulfillment, connection to the creator when I ponder the stars and when I just observe them. I'm not trying to do any divination. I'm not trying to be a fortune teller. I'm not trying to see people's future. I think that's where it can start to get abused, but really just admiring this intelligent design and seeing, like you said, the practical aspects of it. Whenever people really shit on astrology and the science of light and the stars, I ask them what they think the sun and the moon are doing for us, and then they can always find a way to agree that those luminaries have an effect on us, but not the other one, not the other ones, not the planets, not the stars. And so let me ask you this. There are two main camps when it comes to astrology. There are people who study the science of the sun in relation to the stars, and that would be called sidereal or Vedic astrology. And then there's the science of the sun as it relates basically to itself. And that's tropical astrology. So is there one that you prefer between Vedic and tropical? or Vedic and Western. And can you just help us parse those out and the main differences between them, and if you have a preference?
Absolutely. I mean, off the bat, I'm an advocate and lover of tropical astrology. I do view Vedic astrology as very misled astrology. And it's funny because I think globally Vedic is more popular today, but popularity, Ken Wheeler loves to say, what's popular is never true and what's true is never popular. But at least for right now, anyway, so tropical astrology, like you said, it is the sun in relation to itself. Specifically, it's the study of the sun on its annual eternal path on the ecliptic. I know, maybe not, but I'm sure many of your listeners and people have seen that, like the figure 8 that the sun makes,
The
right? That
analemma.
solar analemma. Absolutely,
Analemma,
exactly.
excuse me.
Or whatever, analemma. I'm not sure which one it is. Tomato, tomato. It's an LEM of some sort, right? Analemma. It's all good. But yeah, that beautiful figure 8, which is of course where we derive the infinity symbol from, also the number 8, right? Like that alone shows the eternal path of the sun, and the fact that the analemma pops up everywhere is just wonderful. But that's what astrology or tropical astrology is, because the sun, and it's called tropical because the sun moves between the Tropic of Cancer to the Tropic of Capricorn, back and forth, always and forever. And that is a north to south measurement. So tropical astrology focuses on the north to south measurement of the luminaries and the planets, whereas Vedic astrology focuses on the east to west. And that's the real distinction, is east to west, the stars are slipping. And that's the biggest thing to understand with tropical astrology, is the signs are not the stars, right? They share the same name as the constellations, but the sign you can think of as part of a sine wave, right? The sign goes to Cancer, gets as far north as it can, dips back down, and then goes back up, goes to Capricorn, and then we'll go back to the equator, and then back up to Cancer again, right? Year after year, it goes from Cancer to Capricorn, Cancer to Capricorn. And the sine wave, right? So like the word sine, I would think of as just like a chunk of that sine wave. There are 30-degree sections, and that's what's beautiful. Like astrology is such a science; it's pure measurements. There's no guesswork. When the sun hits the Tropic of Cancer, that is the first degree and first minute of the sign of Cancer. And with tropical astrology, it will always be that way. Whereas with Vedic astrology, as the stars slip, they slip their signs as well. So in 8,000 years, what they now consider, right? Many people have heard like that, like, oh, I'm a Gemini in tropical astrology, but in Vedic astrology, I'm a Taurus, right? Because like in Vedic, everyone's pretty much one sign over, because
It's like 23 degrees off, right?
Exactly. And that's another thing too, is just spoiler alert, in my opinion, I do not think we are in the age of Aquarius. We, like you said, it's 23 degrees. That's exactly it. We're still in the age of Pisces, because we are rising on the 7th degree of Pisces still. So we are not out of Pisces yet on the vernal equinox. The age is allegedly determined by where the sun rises on the vernal equinox. And that's the one thing Vedic astrology does well, is it does track the slippage, right? That's the age. So in my opinion, the slippage of the stars is meant to tell us the age. Whereas for like everyday astrology, like whether it's looking at a birth chart, a horary chart, mundane astrology or whatever, I think tropical is superior for that. So really, I think Vedic is just incredibly misled. Some have made the argument that India is the one country that could not kick out the Jesuits, and their astrology was corrupted by the Jesuits. Perhaps, again, I'm just not claiming that, but that theory is out there. But yeah, tropical astrology, it's very simple to understand when you realize that it's just a north to south tracking, whereas the Vedic is the east to west tracking, and that's the biggest distinction there.
That's so interesting. I've actually never heard it broken down like that, but I can see the north to south movement of the sun between the tropics every year. And I know that creates the analemma. And I think anyone can test this too. In your house, if you have a window that gets light in it, you're going to see the shapes of the light change over the course of the year, because the sun is getting closer to the north in the summer and it's getting closer to the south in the winter. Now, I don't know if I should bring this up now. I do want to get to this in the second half of the show, where we discuss heliocentrism versus geocentrism. But when we talk about the sun moving relative to the Earth, we mean that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Okay.
100%. 100%. Yeah, we can save that for the latter half of the show for sure. That's totally fine. But yeah, at least it looks like the sun's moving. Of course we're moving around the sun, but it sure does look like that sucker's moving. But of course we're rotating around it. Yeah,
Of
absolutely.
course, we're spinning at 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, but 500 miles per hour in Scandinavia at a different angle of spin. But yeah, totally regard. We're going to get to that later. We're going to break all that down later. When you're talking about slippage of the stars in Vedic astrology, is that because the stars are moving almost the same exact rate of the sun, a little off? And then is this what happens is you have the great year, right? Where the precession of the equinoxes makes a full rotation, basically giving, and is that like a 25,000 year cycle? Can you speak on the great year?
Yeah, sure. If you want to read a book, I'm just going to throw a book out there for anyone interested in the astrological world cycles. I believe it's called that. I think it's called Astrological World Cycles by Tara Mata. And she was an American who went over to India, studied over many Indian gurus, and she wrote an excellent book in English, in my opinion, the best on the astrological ages. But yes, so it's said to be either a 25,260 or whatever. It's like it's so far out of our time scope that the calculations do vary. But between 24,000 and 26,000 years is the great year. I've heard explanations, and in her book she argues that the stars don't always slip at the same rate, and that's why it's likely 24,000 years. And again, she says that there are records of that being the case, that the Indian astrologers kept those records. But yes, the way it works at present is that every 72 years, the stars slip from where they were 1 degree. So it's 170, 172th, 172nd of a degree every year is the slippage. And the Vedic astrologers account for that in their astrology, and tropical astrologers never will.
Interesting. Okay, so I want to zoom in a little bit on tropical astrology
Sure.
because you drew a difference between the signs as the constellations, like Aries, Taurus, Gemini, and then the tropical energies of Aries, Taurus, Gemini. They're actually different, right? Because this is where it breaks down for people. They say, I'm an Aries, I was born March 30th or whatever. And then they say, but that should mean the sun was in front of the constellation Aries. However, it's not, because we're using a tropical system. What it does mean is that they were born right after the spring equinox. So we are looking at the solar energy of the seasons. And I've heard tropical astrology defined as the science of light. So here I am just sharing this image of a sine wave. You see my sine wave here?
I sure do. That's awesome. That's it, the sine wave. And that's so funny because it's SINE, but also SIGN, right? So you got sines and sine, and it's just a beautiful connection there.
Right. So that x-axis is basically the equator, 0 degrees latitude, and then the sine wave itself is basically the path of the sun. And as the sun progresses through the year from March 21st to April 21st, it gets closer to the Tropic of Cancer. And it gets closer till it hits on the first day of Cancer season, June 21st. And again, I'm using 21st for all these. It could be the 20th, it could be the 22nd. It could vary slightly, but I'm just using 21st to make it easy. And then the sun starts to make a wider circle back toward the equator, and then giving the northern hemisphere our winter when the sun is over the Tropic of Capricorn, conveniently on the day that Capricorn season starts. So I really just want to reiterate, when we're looking at tropical astrology, the one that is preferred by Merlin and myself, we are talking about the science of light and the science of the seasons. And I think this might be a good segue into talking about sort of the archetypes of the signs, because it's easy for people to grasp this when we say Aries is really just the first month of spring. You know, it has a spring energy. Everybody knows what that energy feels like. Things are coming back to life. And that's also why Aries is the cardinal fire sign. It's the spark of life. So I guess I'll just start there and we can kind of introduce maybe some of the archetypes of these signs. Or did I say anything that makes you want to go off on anything I said?
No, I think the sine wave and understanding, like you said, it's the science of light. That's a beautiful way to put it. And the sun behaves differently as the sun moves further north and south, right? Like we understand that. Like, you know, when the sun hits the Tropic of Cancer, it's very warm outside. When it's the Tropic of Capricorn, it's very cold outside in the northern hemisphere. And astrology is especially tropical astrology, even Vedic, is a northern hemisphere focused science. So as the sun behaves differently as it goes north to south, right? That is on the physical level with the warmth, but also the spiritual level as it produces different types of individuals in the different, you know, times of the year. Like you said, people who are born under Aries, they tend to be headstrong. They tend to be rash. They can rush into things. That spark of life, they have that warrior energy because Aries is ruled by Mars. These things, if you know Aries people, they're pretty undeniable if you know enough of them. And then all you have to do to really understand astrology is that as the sun behaves differently moving north to south, so does every other heavenly body that moves, which is the wandering stars and the moon. So, and that's such a great defense of tropical astrology because the fixed stars only move west to east. They don't have the north to south drift that is necessary to produce these differences that are discernible and tangible in the real world. So yeah, I would say that is I wanted to pop off about that for a second.
No, that's great. I love that. And yes, you mentioned Aries people. This summer, I was talking to a friend's group about astrology, and I brought up the correspondence and the correlation between astrological signs and body parts. So
Yeah.
it starts at Aries in the head, all the way down to Pisces in the feet. And one of my friends asked me, "Can you explain more about that?" So I said, "Sure." Take Aries, for example. They lead with their heads. It's all about the head. They generally wear head accessories or have big hair. I actually, the past two places I lived when I had roommates, there was an Aries at each one of them. And one of my Aries roommates had like a huge like dreadlock on his head, and it made his head like 4 inches taller, you know,
Right
and
on.
just big hair. And he had a big head, and he was kind of like you said, headstrong and had a spark to him. The other guy, he was a country singer, and he always wore like a big cowboy bucket hat with long hair. And Aries represents the head. So I was telling these people that, and I said, you know, Aries people generally, you know, they can go head first into things. And some guy who I never had met up until that point, had mutual friends. He was there. He said, "Dude, that's so weird. I'm an Aries and I'm about to dive headfirst into this water." Like that's what he was.
Nice.
He was like taking his clothes off as I was talking, and then he backs up and runs straight headfirst into the water. And then something else happened this summer where I was working at the farmers market, and I just see a dude walking around browsing the tents, and he had on a big hat, big glasses, he had a big beard, and he was carrying a child on his shoulders. And as he passed my table, I said, "Hey, brother, random question. Are you an Aries?" And he stopped and he looked at me like I had two heads, and he goes, "Dude, how did you know that?" I was like, "You just got all these head accessories on. I don't know. It's just a wild guess. You just have Aries energy." And so, you know, I have also been wrong guessing people's signs because it's so dynamic, and you don't have
Mhm.
just one sign. You have many. There's a sun sign, a rising sign, moon, Mars, etc. But I just wanted to give those couple little anecdotes about um, being able to tell the essence of these things, right? So we discussed Aries a little bit. What are Taurus? I don't want to say what are Taurus people like, but what is the energy of the Taurus archetype?
Yeah, so Taurus is ruled by Venus and the moon exalts in Taurus. So we have, you know, the flowy nature of the moon there, but mostly the pleasure seeking nature of Venus, right? Venus is associated with pleasure, with lovemaking. So Taurus natives really tend to enjoy earthly things. Um, they tend to eat quite a bit. Taurus is the bull, so you can think of like the feminine cow, right? Like the milk of life. Like again, milk sustains us all, and that's a very feminine energy. You can't get milk from a dude, So that is Taurus. So it's got the strong feminine energy and attachment to earthly goods because Taurus is a fixed earth sign. Like you mentioned, that Aries is cardinal air. Taurus is fixed earth. So there is a fixation on earthly goods. Taurus is associated with the metals from the earth. And that's more of a second house association too. But yeah, Taurus natives are just they're down to earth. They're pretty chill. They're very stubborn. You can't. It's difficult to force a bull to do something. You have to coax the bull, or hopefully, gently lead the bull. There's this great fable that I love, like where it's like there are two farmers, and they're trying to get this bull to move, and they're like they can't push it, they can't pull it. The bull's just sitting there being a bull. It won't move. And then this beautiful maid walks up and she puts like like some butter on her finger or something and like sticks her finger in the bull's mouth and then leads the bull that way. So it's like, when the bull tasted what it wanted to taste, it was ready to move, but otherwise it was stubborn and immovable.
Yeah, and you mentioned it's a fixed earth sign, and I want to take a minute and talk about the elements. So there are 4 elements that sort of just alternate: fire, earth, air, water, fire, earth, air, water, fire, earth, air, water. That makes the 12 signs.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also I have it labeled on the chart here as type, but what do you call that? The cardinal, fixed, and mutable energies.
Those are called modalities.
Okay, modalities. And so that is a confusing one for some people to wrap their heads around. They're like, what does that mean, fixed? What does it mean to be fixed? And it's not so simple as it means stubborn, although they do have a bit of a connection. The way I see it is cardinal, fixed, and mutable make up one season. So if we take spring, for example, we have Aries, Taurus, and then Gemini. Think about that as effectively April, May, June. We know it's shifted 10 days, but effectively those first 3 months of spring, that's one unit. You have the first sign of that season. That's cardinal. That means first,
Mm-hmm.
I also look at it like a sound envelope. For those familiar with waveforms and sound recording, there's always an attack, a sustain, and a release. So it's this triune nature of, I think, the universe that is manifest pretty much everywhere. And then each season we get this triune nature of an attack, sustain, release, which is really just cardinal, fixed, mutable. The beginning, the middle, and the end. Would you like to add anything to the modality picture to help us just see what these energies mean, cardinal, fixed, mutable?
Yeah, that's actually, you said it really well. What's cool, like if someone's like, oh, what does it mean to be fixed? Well, let's look at the fixed signs, right? You have Taurus as fixed spring. Like you said, every season contains one of each of the modalities. So, it begins with a cardinal fire, like spring is a cardinal fire of Aries, and then a fixed earth of Taurus, and then the mutable air of Gemini, and then with Cancer, the cardinal again, the beginning, summer begins. But let's think about Taurus for a second to focus on just the fixed signs. So the way I like to think about it is this, right? Each of the fixed signs, there's nothing more that element or that season rather than that sign. Like there's nothing more spring than Taurus. It's the most spring sign between April 20th and May 19th. That's as spring as it gets. It's definitely not winter. It's also definitely not summer yet. Whereas if you look at Gemini going from June 20th or June 21st, I'm sorry, May 20th or 21st over to June 20th or 21st, right? By the time Gemini is over, it's quite summery. Like late June, mid-June, it's hot outside. It is definitely getting pretty summery. And that's what those mutable signs do with the seasons. And every season ends with a mutable sign because it takes that mutable. And guys, the word mutable means changeable. So it's a changeable energy. Like Gemini, if you want to know what Gemini is as a mutable air sign, It is the air that you breathe in and out. Like that's why Gemini rules the lungs. Gemini rules the beginning of the twinning of your body. The arms and the lungs is what Gemini rules. And of course, in order to speak and to breathe, you must, take the air in, transmute it within your body, and then, eject it essentially, right? So that's what Gemini is. It's very changeable. And you'll notice that all of the mutable signs, there's a changeability to them. But the fixed signs are the most, the most of their season that their season is, right? Like for summer, Leo is fixed summer. So that's from what, July 20th to August 20th, roughly. Nothing's more summer than that. That's like peak, at Cancer. The sun has had the visitation to the Tropic of Cancer, but it's actually hotter during Leo. Leo is like the dog days of August, the dog days of summer. It's hot outside. It's hot. It's so hot outside in Leo. And then for fall, you have Scorpio. Nothing is more fall than Scorpio. What's Scorpio? We have Halloween during Scorpio, the most, fall of all the seasons. And that's from October 20th to November 20th, roughly for Scorpio. And then Aquarius is fixed winter. And there's nothing more wintry than Aquarius from June 20th over to February 20th. That tends to be a very snowy or rainy season for most parts of the world, really cold. And you'll notice that each of the fixed signs, there's one of each element, right? So like Taurus is, Earth, fixed spring. We have Earth Day during that time. Leo is the fire, and that's summer, and summer is characterized by its heat. So, of course, the fire sign has to be the fixed summer. Fall is when things start getting cold. And what's funny is each of the elements is associated with either hot, dry, wet, or cold. And water is the cold one. You would think water is wet, right? Like, oh, water is wet. Air is wet because air has a moisture to it. Whereas water, if you're just like in the depths of the ocean or the edges of Antarctica, right? That's freezing. That's really cold stuff. Fire is hot, and then earth is dry. Sorry, that was like a random tangent on the elements right there. But yeah, when it comes to the fixed signs, I think they're just the most elementy of their element. And then just knowing that each season ends with a mutable element to change into what comes next. And if you want to know the difference between cardinal, fixed, and mutable, let's just look at the fire signs. So it starts with Aries, which is, you said, like the spark of life. So Aries is like a fire. If you're making a campfire, you spark to start the fire, right? And then Leo is the campfire as you want it. It's fixed. It's roaring like a lion, right? Fires roar. And then Sagittarius is the mutable, the end of the fire. That's the ember. And of course, even the word ember shows up in the months of Sagittarius, November and December. So truly, you can see it like just the fire signs by making a campfire. Aries is the spark. Leo is the sustained fire when you're feeding it with wood and it's roaring like a lion. And then as the fire dies down in the morning, in the morning too, is such a good word. The morning, that's your Sagittarius right there. So I hope that wasn't too much. I'm sorry if I just went off right there, but yeah.
No, that's amazing. That's why I got you here. I like how you looked at all the fixed signs. It's really interesting, actually. One of my grandfathers, one side of my grandparents had 4 grandchildren, and we are all the different fixed signs. So
that's so cool.
My 2 brothers are Aquarius and Taurus, and then my cousin is a Leo. So whenever we get together, we represent, I guess, those fixed signs, which kind of makes a T. If you were to look at, instead of a sine wave, if you look at it like a circle, like Merlin has behind him on the board, you can start to study the angles of opposition and the angles of aspects. So I think I might like to talk about that, because this is another thing about astrology that's very interesting, is that it's not static, right? It's always moving, and these planets are always moving. The sun's always moving. Things are moving, and that means the relationship of these bodies are moving. And that's why we don't feel the same energies all the time. It's always in flux. So let's take a look at the aspect of a 90-degree angle, which would create a square. And that would be if we were comparing, let's say, Scorpio to Leo. Or more precisely, 15 degrees Scorpio to 15 degrees Leo would make a perfect 90-degree angle. And so we know that the circle has 360 degrees. Conveniently, the year also has close to 360 degrees. So that's very convenient for us when we do our math, because we know that 1 degree is roughly 1 day. It's kind of cool how that works. And I actually wonder if we got 360 degrees from that being how many days we have in a year. But talk to me about aspects. Why do 90-degree angles have a dissonant aspect? Why do oppositions, which are also another type of a 90-degree, because it's 180, which is 90 times 2, why do those have more of a dissonant energy, whereas the trine aspects, like 120 degrees, why do those have more harmonious energy? Can you break that down a little bit?
Absolutely. And that's such a good question. And the fact that we already talked about astrology being the study of light, right? Light radiates. So what it is a square is 1/4 of the heavens. Like you said, there's 360 degrees in a circle. So if two things are 90 degrees away, that is 1/4 of the circle. And that is called tetragonal radiation. Tetra is the word four. And what's cool is you mentioned in the fixed signs, that's actually like the tetragrammaton too. Like God is depicted as a bit of Aquarius, Scorpio, Leo, and Taurus, right? That's the tetragrammaton. But enough about that for a second. So yeah, a square is tetragonal radiation, and you can see it's not good. There's a clash there. So a square is tetragonal, whereas a trine is triagonal, and triangles are beautiful and harmonious. So that it's literally the type of radiation of heat. A trine is a 120-degree separation of the heavens. So that forms a triangle. A sextile is also a more acute triangle. It's 1/6. So that's hexagonal radiation is what that is. So it's a 1/6 separation of the heavens. And an opposition is, I don't know if it's biagonal or what I forgot the term for specifically for an opposition, but you can see with an opposition there's a 180-degree separation, and that's just two forces going at, completely clashing, which is interesting because there's a huge debate among astrologers which well, sort of, which angles are worse, oppositions or squares. And for the most part, oppositions are said to be the most malefic aspect, but many astrologers, and Abu Mashar and Guido Bonatti agree on this, that the one of the worst aspects in a chart is a Saturn square Mars. That is one of the most malefic configurations anyone could have in a birth chart, or if that's happening in the sky. That happened recently, about a month ago. We had Saturn square Mars for a while, and I at least saw the effects of that all over. So
That's really interesting. So Saturn square Mars, and that also takes into account the energies and the archetypes of both Saturn and Mars. Saturn is known, well, let's introduce it this way. The planets are often associated with gods. How did we get there? Like how did people ever come to agree that Saturn has the energy of someone who eats their children? Saturn has energy of a judge. Why did they call it Chronos, the timekeeper? Was it because it has the greatest cycle of all the visible planets? And how did Mars become the god of war? Like, I'm really curious to know this one red planet that we call Mars, how it became associated with the god of war and warlike energy.
that is such a cool question, and the answer is equally as cool because like cultures all over the world that didn't probably directly connect with each other came to the same conclusions. So how the luminaries and planets became associated with gods is because, if we had no Netflix, no computers, no nothing, and all we had was like our lives and what are we doing for fun at night, we're looking at the stars probably. People pretty much determined that these things have an influence on us. Like it's again, like we talked about earlier, the sun's influence is undeniable. And then you see every other star in the sky in the same exact spot every day of the year over and over and over again, except these 5 wandering stars, right? So it's like, oh wow, those are different. There's definitely something up with that. And it's really the effects they have. What you said about Saturn, how it does have the longest synodic cycle. Every heavenly body, the two luminaries and the five planets, they have a certain or a certain time rather to transit the zodiac. The sun is 365.25 days. Everyone knows that's a year. The moon does it every 29.5 days or 28 days. And that's what's funny about the moon, is the moon's a bit no offense to the women out there, but the moon's a bit wishy-washy. The moon doesn't have the stability and steadiness that the sun does. There's something very, very, and that's so cool, because like people like to think, oh, the turtle shell calendar, it's based off of the moon, but the moon isn't steady enough for a calendar. If you want to track time, you want it to be really steady. And the steadiest planets are Saturn and the sun. They are reliable. That's why all of these solar archetypes and solar heroes, they focus on, life-giving benevolent properties and reliability, because there's nothing more reliable than the sun. It's going to rise every day, and we can thank God for that, because without the sun, we're cooked, right? Not literally, but I guess, so yeah, I mean, how Mars came to be the warrior is just the effects that Mars has. Aries and Scorpio are the two signs ruled by Mars, and the people born under those signs are the warrior archetype. They have something to fight for. Aries is the brash young man who's a bit headstrong, whereas Scorpio is the kind of haggard veteran of war who's more careful, has seen the harsh realities of life, is more calculating. And every planet, besides the two luminaries, rules two signs, and they sort of have that duality. You go from Taurus to Libra for Venus, and Taurus, the beautiful young woman overflowing with the spring of life, to Libra, which is beauty, that's symmetry, that's where you need to get to. But there's a fall in Libra. And how you said Saturn is Chronos, the timekeeper. Saturn exalts in Libra. So that is really how Saturn became associated with law. And as the timekeeper, Saturn is the most meticulous planet. I got to find a way to say this humbly, but I really I did a lot of research into the retrogression patterns of the planets. People talk about the planets going retrograde, right? You've heard like people, and again, people make fun of it all the time. They go, "Oh, Mercury's retrograde. How's that going?" We've all heard the stereotypes of this, but if you study the patterns, they're incredible. And Saturn has the most consistent retrograde. Saturn's the 7th planet, and every time Saturn retrogrades, he goes back exactly 7 degrees. It's the most incredible thing. So, I mean, Saturn is meticulous. And then the ancients always associated with Saturn, meticulous timekeeping, planning, right? There are benefic and malefic planets. You've got Venus and Jupiter as your benefic or good planets, and Mars and Saturn as your malefic. Now, a lot of people would take issue with that and say, oh, those planets aren't malefic. They're good. They can teach you lessons. It's like, yeah, they can teach your lessons, but they'll kick your butt while they do it. Like they definitely have a malefic energy. And that goes back for millennia. That's not something anyone made up. I don't think there's much debate about it. I think it's very much set in stone that those planets are malefic. So when you think about the malefic energies, right, like they both govern different types of bad deeds. Saturn's very selfish. Saturn eating his children, you asked about that. Saturn eating his children. Saturn rules timekeeping, and what eats all children on Earth? Time. Eventually, we will all be eaten away, the sands of time. There's that great poem, Ozymandias, all that was left was the rubble and the ruins, right? So Saturn eats his children because time is what eats us all, and Saturn rules time. That's why Saturn's associated with death. And going back to the point I made about malefics, Saturn, they both rule illnesses. There's a great quote that I love by Guido Bonatti, where he says that 90% of the illnesses on Earth are an effect of the malefic rays of Mars and Saturn. And what's funny is I see a lot of people getting pretty sick right now, and Mars is very active in the sky right now. But Mars rules shorter diseases. Like we talked about Mars ruling the head, Mars rules fever. What's malaria? Mal means bad. So take Mars, Marmal. What sign does Mars rules? Aries, malaria, the fever. And whereas Saturn rules chronic diseases, like, long-term illnesses is what Saturn rules. So I hope that was coherent. I'm sorry if that made some
No,
sense
that's
there and kind of hit what you wanted.
amazing, bro. I love it. So are you saying that the energies of these planets simply exist and that they like imprint that energy onto whatever's going on below it, like the Earth and its inhabitants, and that we just pick up on it and it's just simply there?
100%. If I may get not quite to geocentrism yet, but are you comfortable talking about the ether? Is it cool if I bring that up or no?
Absolutely.
So the ether was maligned for the past 100, maybe 150 years. But if you want to really learn about from the master of the ether, I would highly recommend Ken Wheeler's channel, Theoria Apophasis. But in my opinion, the ether is real, and it's about understanding what light is. Because again, what astrology is the science of light, right? But light is not a photon. Sorry, like that's just a mainstream science thing that is incorrect. It is not a wave particle duality. What light is, it's a perturbation of the ether, right? Think about a light in your room. It's not sending out little particles that are landing everywhere. The whole thing is silly in practice, and you can go down the rabbit hole of watching debunking videos of the double slit theory, which is alleged to prove the wave particle duality that proves the photon. But the photon has never been the input or output of any experiment. And that's kind of all I want to say on that. I'm just going to continue assuming that the ether is real and explain light from the lens of the ether being real, if that's okay. So what light is, it's a perturbation of the ether. What does that mean? A disturbance, a perturbation, a disturbance of the ether. Essentially, the light source radiates and disturbs the ether and creates what's called a dielectric circuit, which is what light is. And so light is a perturbation of the ether. It is a dielectric circuit. It is a longitudinal pulse perturbation. That's a whole lot of jargon there, and I apologize for that. But if you take your time with those words and really let them sink in, and especially if you study Ken Wheeler, it took me a long time studying Ken Wheeler. Not to toot my own horn, I'm a little bit sharp, and it took me a long time studying Ken Wheeler to be able to really talk about this intelligently, or at least I hope intelligently. But okay, so the metaphor I would use to describe what light is, right? And this is, again, comes from Ken Wheeler, just to give credit where credit is due, because I love doing that. Think about like sitting in the middle of a pool, right? You flap your arms to create waves, and then those waves go out and reach the edges of the pool or the edges of the lake, right? Now, you're not touching the edges of the pool or the edges of the lake, but you perturbing the water is what sends out a ripple effect, making these waves. That is light moving through the ether. The light source perturbs the ether and creates a circuit to illuminate whatever it can. That's why every light source has a different rate, a different amount of and type of illumination, essentially. Did that kind of make sense?
A little bit. I'm gonna have to listen
Okay.
back to it, listen to it a few times though.
So now, if I may, just to hit on your question, yes, that's how, because that's the mechanics, right? Because if you ask almost any modern astrologer, how does astrology work? I can explain it that way. The heavenly bodies perturb the ether, and like you said, they affect us down here. It's that simple. No one can deny that the sun affects us. All it takes to understand how and why astrology works is that light is not a wave particle duality. So it's not just, this particle traveling through a vacuum. Light is a perturbation of the ether, and the heavenly bodies perturb the ether, and that affects us. And it's literally that simple.
That is really cool, man. Thank you for that answer.
My pleasure.
Speaking of light, and just to draw our attention back to the sine wave, this image that we have pulled up one more time, I'd like to maybe discuss two things that I think are commonly misunderstood in whatever the communities I roll in. Some people might call them new age. When we talk about astrology, people say astrology is wrong, the zodiac is wrong, there should be 13 months, right? Because they do this math and they say, well, 28 days of a moon cycle times 13 equals 364. Therefore, that's the year and that's the Hebrew calendar, and we should have a 13-month calendar. What do you say about that, Merlin?
That is not the case. So 13 times 28 is indeed 364. And then they claim, oh, there's 1 day of rest. However, the year is 365.25 days. So they're not accounting for the 0.25. And that is why they had to go from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar. And that's why time got so messed up. That's like a big misconception of a conspiracy theory. The leap year is necessary. The year is 365.25 days. That's how long it takes for the sun to get from the equator to the Tropic of Cancer, down to the Tropic of Capricorn, and then back to the equator. And that's why all of the different signs, they begin on one of two different days, because the sun is going to reach the equator at 6 a.m., at noon the next time, at 6 p.m. the next time, and then at midnight the next time, and that's the leap year. Then they have to bring it back. That way the extra day is accounted for, because it's literally there. It's undeniable. Like it has to be there. It has to be accounted for. The 13-month calendar is based entirely on misconceptions. The math sounds good. Truthers and conspiracy theorists, trust me, I am a very avid conspiracy theorist. I love to consider myself a truther, but it's just not true. The lunar cycle, the lunar year is 354 days, because the moon takes 28 days to transit the zodiac. So 12 transits of the zodiac is 354 days. And then the difference between that and the solar year, 365.25 minus 354, is what, 11.25 days, I think. So that's how many lunar cycles are left over every year, which is another misconception, right? There are not 13 months or 13 new moons every year. There are 13 new moons every 2 to 3 years, because of that 11.25 days. If you take the ratio of 29, because like a new moon happens every 29.5 days, right? The moon takes 28 days to transit the zodiac, but 29.5 days to produce a new moon. Why? Because as the moon transits the zodiac, so does the sun. So the moon has to catch up to the sun after reaching where it was before. So that's the extra 1.5 days. And that's just it. So like that's why the 13 moons happens once in a while. And that's literally where the expression once in a blue moon comes from. That's called a blue moon. The 13th moon is a blue moon. What does the expression once in a blue moon mean? It means rarely. So to base your calendar on something that happens less frequently than the more common 12 moons is, in my opinion, a bit silly. There's the myth of the turtle shell, right? We've all heard the turtle shell. Oh, it's got, 28 ridges on the outside, 13 on the inside. Some do. Most don't, however, though. That's like, again, the exception rather than the rule. So while it's true once in a while, it's not always true. So it's a total misunderstanding of the lunar cycle with the new moon to the full moon. And it's a total misunderstanding that our calendar is based off of a solar year, not a lunar year. And the solar year is undeniably 365.25 days. And the leap year is undeniably necessary. So I hope that comprehensively explained that.
Thank you for thoroughly debunking the 13 zodiac signs, or the lunar calendar, because it's less reliable. The sun is way more rigid and affects our daily life, it seems, just extremely palpably and obviously. The sun seems to be the primary luminary. And you can see on the sine wave here on this chart that, and you can also see this in the analemma, there's a natural division of fourths of a year, right? Like you mentioned, the sun is over the equator at the first day of Aries. It's over the Tropic of Cancer, first day of summer. It's over the equator again on the on the fall equinox, and then it's over the Tropic of Capricorn on the first day of winter. And it's literally over those lines, meaning on the first day of summer, if you live on 23.5 degrees north latitude, anywhere along that line of latitude, which is roughly kind of where I am in South Florida, we're just right above the Tropic of Cancer. Cuba's just on the other side of the tropic. So if you live there, you will see on the first day of summer at high noon, effectively no shadow, right? The sun is completely directly above you, casting light directly down to you. So I said all that to say, the year is naturally divided into 4 pieces. And then if you take one of those pieces, which is a season, you can naturally divide it into 3, and that gives us 12. The other important thing, which is written on this chart, is that zodiac literally means 12. Zo means 2, so, right? It's the same word. And diac means 10. It's like the same word as dec or decimal, December. And you might say, oh, December is the 12th month. Yeah, but sept, oct, nov, dec, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th month after the spring equinox. So I just want to quickly address that issue with the Gregorian calendar. Why is September the 9th month? If it's sept, that means 7. It's because it's the 7th month after the spring equinox. So the way I see it is 2 calendars superimposed on each other. We have the cosmic calendar, which is Aries to Aries, doesn't change. Well, it changes within 1 year, but every year it's the same. And then you have the Gregorian calendar, which is basically offset by a couple months or a few months and a decan, like in 10 days. So, I'm not too worried that we don't live underneath a calendar that is the exact same as the cosmic one. It might be nice if they were the same, but why do we start the true cosmic months on the 21st of our Gregorian months?
Yeah, like you said, it really is just understanding the decans. It's very interesting because each month is a little bit of both of the signs that are going to be active in that month. And like you said, September is the 7th month after the equinox. It's also the 7th sign. What sign begins in September on September 21st or 22nd? You've got Libra, the scales of judgment. That's why many churches also celebrate Judgment Day. That's why you have so many different rapture predictions, right? Oh, judgment's coming, September. That's Libra. So why the 20th to start, the signs, and then the 1st to start the month? I think it's hidden, I think it just goes to, occult knowledge that like those in power don't want everything to be so obvious. And is that like, oh, so shadowy? Not really. It's very benign. It's not there to harm you because it doesn't matter what day you think it is. The sun's going to be doing what the sun does anyway. It doesn't matter so much. And then it's even a beautiful recognition, like you said, to know that the true new year does start in Aries and then April 1st, April Fool's Day, which is not a bad thing. That's another truther thing where people go, oh, are we just such fools for following the Gregorian calendar? No, April Fool's Day is for the Fool card in the tarot deck. And the Fool card in the tarot deck symbolizes and represents the start of a new journey. You want to be, at least I want to be a fool, because to be a fool is to recognize that you don't know everything. So it's like, yeah, we begin our new year journey on April Fool's Day, but it's not malicious. It's unless you want to read it that way, which of course, you're welcome to, but I don't read it that way, But yeah, the significance of the deacons, to try to more directly address your question, and for those who don't know, and this goes back to Marcus Manillius too, who was a great Roman astronomer who wrote a poem called the Astronomica, which is this little sucker right here. Very cool book. It's very short, and the left page it's going to be written in Latin, and then the right page has the English translation. It's a very, very short read because it's really half a book. But Manillius and Ptolemy, they really cataloged the fixed stars. And there are 12 zodiacal constellations, but each of them have an additional 3 decans. So there are 36 decans total because 3 times 12 is 36. And that's the original 48 constellations. And they're all very significant. So I think that the reason that we start the month on the new year is like an homage to the decans, right? For instance, the decans of Perseus or of Aries, you've got Perseus as the first decan of Aries. So, like, Perseus is this great mythological figure. The word Perseus is actually an anagram for pursues. He's the pursuer. So, he's there on the start. He's ready to pursue. He's ready to get to it. It's just fantastic. So I really do think that it was intelligent design by those working for Pope Gregory on the Gregorian calendar to begin these things. Like, our secular new year begins January 1st. And like you mentioned earlier, the sun is on the Tropic of Capricorn on December 21st, the winter solstice. And the word solstice literally comes from the Latin sol, which is sun, and then sistere, which is still. And the sun stands still for 3 days. And then on December 25th, it rises. So December 25th is obviously a very significant day for so many reasons. But then January 1st is exactly 1 week after that. People got to realize when it comes to astrology, the week is also incredibly divine because each of the planets has their own day of the week. The sun has Sunday, the moon, Moon Day. And I'll just go into Spanish too, real quick, if that's okay. So, like, Sunday in Spanish is domingo. So you think, oh, what connection is that to the sun? Well, what body has dominion over Earth? The sun, our preserver, the ruler of Earth, Domingo.
And it's the most dominant luminary there is, too.
Dude, that's exactly it. If any other celestial body is too close to the sun, the brilliance and radiance of the sun overpowers it and renders that heavenly body invisible until it distances itself from the sun. So yeah, dominant, dude, is such a good word for El Sol, the sun. And of course, we only have one sun. We get the word solo from the sun. The moon is equally cool. We only have one moon. Moon is an anagram for mono. And then to say Monday, which is the moon's day in Spanish, is lunes or lunes, I think.
Lunes.
And luna is the moon is la luna, right? And you can take that la una, the one, luna. So it literally means the one in Spanish, and then mono in English. So it's literally there's one moon, one sun. Tuesday is Mars, which is tyranny, Tears Day, or Martes in Spanish. Wednesday is for Mercury, Woden, Odin, or Mercury, or miércoles in Spanish, right? So Thursday is Thor's Day, Jueves, Ju for Jupiter. Friday is Freya or Frigga or Viernes in Spanish, Venus's day. And then Saturn is Sabado, Saturn's day. So, I said all that. I'm sorry for that tangent, but that's why I think that the new year begins 1 week after the sun moves. It's like to give reverence for the days of the week. The days of the week are so important. And if you want to practice astrological magic, which is a big pet topic of mine, you need to know your days of the week in order to calculate your planetary hours, which is a whole other conversation. But I think those in the know just know how significant a week is. There's no action that it's 7 days. You can't have 8-day weeks. You can't have 9-day weeks. It's got to be 7. Just like there's 7 colors of the rainbow, 7 chakras in the body, 7 major nerve centers, 7 lamps of heaven in the Bible, and on and on and on. The number 7 is incredibly divine.
Dude, thank you so much for that breakdown. I really like how you brought it back to the days of the week, because that's one of the most obvious ways to see some of the planetary influences in culture. Another way that the 7 is sort of baked in to our natural world is the moon cycle. I think the moon helps me see the weeks very, very clearly, because from the new moon to the perfect half moon is 7 days. And from that half moon to the full moon, 7 days. From that full moon to the half moon again, the week is visible in the sky. I like to say we live in a clock, we live in a calendar. You can tell the time of day, you can tell the time of year, you can tell the age of the great year that we live in, the time of the month, the length of the weeks, without any of these man-made calendars. So if you want to take your power back, listeners, and if you feel like, the Gregorian calendar doesn't align with the natural world and we're living out of alignment, just start paying attention to the solar energy, to the signs and seasons in the sky. And that's your cosmic clock, people. You don't have to worry that the Matrix is telling you the Happy New Year on January 1st. Just say Happy New Year and move on, right? It's not a big deal. If you can see both of the calendars at once, the Gregorian calendar and the cosmic one, you are set, right? And so I don't personally see a point in like rejecting the Gregorian calendar like a lot of people do. So I really appreciate the way you just broke that down. And I like the way you revere, the cosmos and what it can teach us. I think that's absolutely beautiful.
God's intelligent design is undeniable. And I think it's just natural to have a reverence for it. Everyone has their connection to God in some way. And mine is just, doing my best to understand these patterns. And again, if you're a conspiracy theorist, you love pattern recognition, you'll love astrology. Astrology is top tier. There's no better way to take your love of pattern recognition, in my opinion, than to apply it to astrology. It's just chef's kiss, just the best.
Yes, I can tell you have a real love for this, but I can also tell that you have a knack for communicating it. And I think I'd be remiss if we didn't really discuss Mercury much. So I do want to, before we switch gears a little bit, I understand that, are you a Gemini sun sign?
I am indeed. Yes.
And so, okay, so in my understanding, the Gemini archetype is ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is the god of communication. He's the messenger god, the closest planet to the sun. He's the communicator of the planets. Hermes, the messenger, and they're known for their rhetoric and orating abilities. Sometimes I wish I had a little more Mercury in my chart. It's hard for me to get things out sometimes. Can you talk to me just a little bit about Mercury? And I know for some people who don't fully grasp astrology, it's going to be a jump to go from Gemini to Mercury. But why does the sign of Gemini have Mercury as a rulership? And can you break down Mercury just a little bit as it pertains to communication?
Sure, absolutely. So Mercury rules 2 signs. It rules Gemini and it rules Virgo. And you'll see the planets, guys, if you notice, like a few rule earth and air signs, right? Because Gemini is air, Virgo is earth. Venus rules Taurus and Libra, air and earth. And then Saturn rules Capricorn and Aquarius, air and earth. So like these planets have these connections that are undeniable. But for Mercury specifically, the air to earth connection, Mercury is the closest planet to the sun. It rules air to earth. He was personified as Hermes, or Thoth Hermes Trismegistus, right? So the air part is the ether, or think about where do we get our thoughts from? What is consciousness? The Mercury is the mind, but because it connects consciousness to earth, which is our body, right? We are made of the earth. So your mind, the mind is airy, but the physical brain and your body and how you perceive these thoughts, at least currently in this world, it's through our bodies and through ourselves. And it's the air to earth connection. That's what Mercury really is. As a planet, I mentioned earlier benefics and malefics earlier. Mercury is cool because Mercury is neither benefic nor malefic. Mercury
Can I interject real quick?
Of course, yeah, please.
So the greater malefic would be Saturn, the greater benefic would be Jupiter. Then there's the greater sorry, then there's the lesser benefic, which would be Venus, has that positive energy, and then the lesser malefic, bad energy, which would be Mars. And then, so I just wanted to put those in their little cubbies and then
Yes.
let you continue with Mercury. Are you saying it doesn't apply to any of those spots?
Correct. Yeah, Mercury is its own thing. It's the most mutable. And this is so cool. Think of each of the planets rules a different metal too. There are but going back to sevens, there are the 7 primary alchemical metals. You've got Saturn with lead. You've got Jupiter rules tin. You've got Mars rules iron, right? You fight your wars with iron. Oh, he's got a will of iron. You don't want a will of bronze or a will of copper. You want a will of iron. The sun rules gold, Venus rules copper, the moon rules silver, and Mercury rules quicksilver. And what's cool about Mercury or quicksilver is that it is the only metal which is liquid at room temperature. If you look at Mercury, like there are so many cool videos online of like someone putting like an anvil in Mercury, and it's buoyant at the top of the quicksilver, right? So like it is such a cool metal, but the fact that it is a liquid metal is how you can really understand the mutability or changeability of Mercury. It's neither good nor bad. Mercury is entirely self-interested, much like the mind. The mind is where we really do keep our self-interests, where the heart of gold is, the golden rays that we can cast out to really help others with our heart of gold. But our quicksilver mind is very self-interested, and Mercury takes on, if you look at a birth chart, if Mercury is most impacted by the planet Saturn, for instance, you might have a very malefic Mercury in your birth chart. Whereas if Jupiter or Venus is near Mercury, you may have a very benefic, very happy, jovial type Mercury. And what's great, and we can thank, at least I thank God for this, is Mercury does not travel farther than 30 degrees from the sun. I think it's 29.5 degrees as Mercury's leash. I think that's, I forget exactly, but Mercury can only go so far from the sun. So typically Mercury tends to be better off than not, because if Mercury is with the sun, that's pretty great. That's like a soul mind connection, which is typically pretty good. So while Mercury is neither benefic nor malefic, God's intelligent design, in my opinion, does tend it toward beneficence, if that makes sense, because of its proximity to the sun.
Dude, you just blew my mind. Are you
Yeah.
saying that you never see Mercury and Sun farther than a certain amount of degrees in any astrological chart or in the sky?
Correct. Yeah. Mercury will never, like, let's say you have an Aries sun. Your Mercury can only be in Aries, or it can be in Pisces, or it can be in Taurus. It can never be farther than one sign away from the sun, because at that point it will start retrogressing and going quicker than the sun to catch back up, or it will start its direct course going backwards and doing its thing. So yeah, it will never stay farther from the sun based on its retrogression pattern.
That is amazing. That makes me think that maybe is Mercury tethered to the sun? Like I know that some planets exhibit patterns that could be a secondary orbit, almost like a planet going around another planet, and there's actually 2 orbits happening, a bigger one and a smaller one, and then that's why we actually see retrograde as a zigzag in the sky, forward, backward, but it's really a circular secondary orbit. Is that how you see it, or no?
No, so Mercury is tethered to the sun, but retrograde motion is, can I use this behind me? I don't know. Will this be visible
Absolutely.
if I show it? Okay,
Let me
because
take
like,
down the other one and you can show us
sure.
your images.
Let's pretend that, for such an easy example, that Venus is at 0 degrees, or the first degree of Aries, 0 degrees, 1 minute, right there on the equator, essentially, right? So now, if everything, the way the planets and the stars move is that this is the east, this is the west, everything rises here and then sets in the west, right? So everything's going clockwise around us because, like you said, we do indeed live in a clock. So if Venus wants to go from Aries to Taurus, well, Venus is moving east to west with everything else because you can see it in the sky. It's undeniable. These things move east to west around us. And this is going to bring in geocentrism at this point, if that's cool, because you can only understand this properly from a geocentric point of view. Because if you're a heliocentrist, then retrogression is illusory. It's not actually happening. It looks like it's happening, but it's not actually happening, right? So if we're taking this from a geocentric point of view, everything is rotating around us east to west. But to move from Aries to Taurus, well, it looks like it would have to go the other direction. What it does, though, is they essentially just move slower than the fixed stars, right? Like if it, because tomorrow, if there's like one full day and the sign of 0 degrees Aries is right there at 6 a.m., tomorrow that's still going to be there at 0 degrees at 6 a.m. 0 degrees Aries is still pretty much going to be rising right there, or 1 degree off. But the Venus rather will have moved a little bit counterclockwise. So it's essentially moving slower than the fixed stars to progress through the zodiac. Does that kind of make sense? If everything is moving east to west, but the planets are drifting west, then they're moving slower than the fixed stars. So when the planets go retrograde, they actually move faster than the fixed stars, because if everything is moving east to west and Venus ends up in Pisces, well, everything went in a circle around the sky, but Venus is further along. That means it moved faster to retrograde, to go retrograde, or as I say, retrogress. You know, planets can progress or retrogress through the zodiac. Did that answer your retrograde question?
Yeah, no, that's really
Okay,
cool. I'm
cool.
starting to see things definitely deeper. And then for any of my listeners who want to dive deeper into the subject, I recommend you guys check out Merlin and Dr. Longo's Astrology podcast. It's every Saturday night they go live, and it's on the Old World Florida channel. Do you guys have a topic for this weekend?
This weekend, I think he said he wanted to revisit, because in the past he did a video on Janus, the genius janitor, and Uranus. And I think he wants to redo that because he wasn't satisfied with how it came out last time, and he wants to do it better this time, essentially. So we've
Cool.
got that. I can spoil some future ones too, man. We're gonna do some really cool episodes. We've got the astrology of Shakespeare coming up, and I wrote my thesis on Hamlet. So I'm kind of a Shakespeare expert, but like, you know, like I love Shakespeare. I know Longo loves Shakespeare. Lots of people love Shakespeare because like the Shakespeare stories, they're timeless. That's
Dude,
why we still study them. Go.
I started reading Shakespeare last year. I mean, I read it in high school, but I forgot it all. And I just found
Yeah.
a couple books when I hunt for used books. And yeah, I read The Tempest and Othello and
Nice.
Macbeth. And some of them are twisted, you know what I mean? But
Oh yeah.
some of them, they are beautiful. I could tell there's astrological underpinnings and archetypes embedded all throughout that stuff.
Dude, you want some quick Othello gravy?
Yeah, hit me.
Desdemona and Othello, they get married. Where do they get married? At the Sagittarius Inn. You shall find us at the Sagittarius Inn. Why Sagittarius? Because Sagittarius is half man, half beast. The whole first act of Othello is like, oh my gosh, Brabantio, your daughter is making the beast with 2 backs with this black Moor. You know, so it's like literally Sagittarius is half man, half beast, and it's like the white one with the black dude, and the stereotypes of that manifest through Sagittarius in Othello, at least at the beginning. It's funny because like Othello is thought to be like the super, like, you know, it's like meant to be like, oh, racism is a strong underpinning, which in a way it is, but really the only character that's racist is the father, Desdemona's daddy-o, whatever his name is, oh, I forget now. But you know, he's upset that his daughter married this guy. But everyone else is like, dude, this Othello's a great guy. You should be happy. You know, your daughter's very lucky. Othello's a very noble man. And like no one else really cares at all. It's just not maybe it's not Brabantio, is it? Maybe it's Brabantio.
It's not
Yeah.
Prospero. That's in the Tempest. I can't remember either. But it's Iago who's the one that's lying to everybody, right?
Yeah, Iago is also the parrot in Aladdin. The parrot in Aladdin who spills the poison into Jafar's ear is named Iago. So yeah, Iago is the devil archetype. He literally uses words to trick people. Just like Iago doesn't make anyone do anything. That's why he is so the devil. He suggests things. And in my opinion, that's how the devil works in this world. The devil can't reach out and make you do anything. He can scare you into doing things, but he can never make you do things. And that's exactly what Iago does. He spills the poison into everyone's ear and corrupts them. And then it shows the power of persuasive speech. And what's great is at the end of the book, when everybody, all they want Iago to do is confess, Iago's last line, "You know what you know, I shall speak no more." Boom. So the whole play, everybody would wish he would just shut up and stop saying all these evil things and stop manipulating people. And then at the end, they're like, "Confess, you demon." He's like, "Nope, I shall never." I think the line is exactly, "I shall never speak tongue again." Just beautiful
Woo!
Shakespeare, man. So
That's
yeah,
awesome. Well, I can't wait for your Shakespeare show. I'll definitely tune into that.
I
And
appreciate
I want to read more Shakespeare plays. They're very rich in possibility of studying, just as you illuminated with a couple of those gravy trains there. But okay, so man, I could ask you so many questions. I think I'm going to save one for maybe next time we talk. It's not as important as the next subject I'd like to bring up, which this has to do with deception. This has to do with Iago suggesting all these lies to us, and then we just believe them because we choose to, based on, I don't know, an appeal to authority, appeal to tradition, appeal to popularity, but it's not appealing to nature. So I'd like to take this time with Merlin to, well, first put myself out there as a fellow geocentrist. I don't think I've really spoken about this publicly. It can turn you into public enemy number one. People can start to really think you're insane if you start claiming labels like this. And it's not about the label, obviously. It's about how I see the world. And when we talk about astrology, that's a science that's inherently geocentric, right? All the charts have Earth as the basis, and then everything revolves around it. And that's what we observe. We are here on Earth, and we're told we're a rock spinning around a bunch of stuff, and it's moving around it. It's expanding, and it's moving in this never-ending space vacuum. But what I see is I look up, and I see just a perfect cyclical working of the heavens. I see a clock. I see the sun doing the same pattern every year. I see the stars doing the same pattern every night. I see the wandering stars, the planets, doing their dance, and they're all fixed. They're all rotating around the North Star. So I've been quiet about this too long, and I've researched it enough to be able to comfortably defend is kind of a strong word, but state my opinion and discuss the reality that we see. So Merlin, were you ever a heliocentrist? Did you follow the herd into that? And when, if so, when did you break out of it?
Oh yeah, my whole life up until 4 or 5 years ago, I was a heliocentrist. This whole journey of geocentrism and astrology has been very quick for me. You know, I grew up just like everybody else, being, going through school, being taught that stuff, and I never really questioned it. As far as when I broke out, I got into a streamer. May I name drop for a second? Just I don't know, it's a little controversial, but Owen Benjamin. I was watching an Owen Benjamin stream, and I really hadn't followed him at all. I saw him. What's funny is he makes fun of this because he was on Stephen Crowder back in the day, and he was like, "Oh, I was on Stephen Crowder," and that was around the time where I started getting out of Crowder. Like, oh, Crowder's a bit of a fruitcake, So like, I didn't really. I was like, not like that, but like, I just kind of like got out of my Crowder phase big time as Owen Benjamin was working with him. So I wasn't too familiar. That all I know is like people said that he went crazy and went in the woods. And I saw one stream one time. I was like, oh, he seems fine. He's just doing his thing in New York, just chilling. And I didn't hear about him forever. And then he got back on Twitter. I started catching his streams, and I loved his message about, just like self-reliance, doing the right thing, focus on yourself, focus on family, a lot of positive messaging. And then he said, not in these words, but to keep the video clean, he was like, yeah, we live in a geocentric universe. I don't care if you disagree. I'm not going to debate it. Earth is what it is. And if you, I'm not going to, he said, I'm not going to debate Eric. I'm not going to debate Eric. And when I heard that, that was the first time that I heard someone who I respected say anything about geocentrism. And I was like, okay, he's not going to debate Eric. Well, I'm going to go see what Eric's all about. And I went and just consumed Eric's content. And I was like, wow, I was blown away. And I just quickly went through it. I went down the rabbit hole so fast. And, I just realized very obviously that we live in a geocentric universe. People think geocentrism is crazy. I think the opposite is true, like very truly, because once you see the deception for what it is, it's not even close, right? Like how you, I'm not going to speak for you, but if you had to, could you vociferously defend veganism and then meat
100%.
eating as not even close? It's like, so like meat eating is so bad. It's not even close, right? That is how I feel about geocentrism. Like, think there are so the problem with heliocentrism is that it requires you to believe so many illusions. Just take the moon, for instance. I love talking about this because just the moon can debunk it. The moon is said to rotate, and yet no one, not a single soul on Earth, has ever seen the moon rotate, nor will they. Why? Because it doesn't rotate. What's the excuse that we're given? Oh, it's rotating, but it's rotating in such a perfect way that you just can't see it rotate.
It's
but trust me,
orbitally locked.
Exactly. It's tidally locked. It's tidally locked. So it's rotating, but you just have to trust us, bro. Okay, so illusion number one. Illusion number two. The sun and the moon are the exact same size in the sky. Oh, but they're not actually, you dummy. They are different sizes, but they just look like they're the same size because of the distances, because the sun is 400 times further away, but it's also exactly 400 times larger. So they look exactly the same size. Like, okay, illusion number two. The sun and the moon look like they're the same size, but they're not. And then the moon itself, the moon looks like a light. It literally, I don't know about you, but I have never seen a floating rock illuminate the night sky. The story is just so crazy. It's so bright. The luminosity of the moon breaks through clouds on a cloudy night. The whole sky could be cloudy, and then the moon will just pierce through those clouds. It's there to be seen. May I share my screen real quick again?
Absolutely.
I'm going to throw it back up. Like you mentioned the North Star. I truly think that knowing this is all you need. The North Star, another illusion. The North Star never moves.
What? Can I make a quick correction?
Yes,
it moves a tiny bit, but it's the least moving of the stars, but it does move a tiny bit. Or is that just because of where I'm standing?
Allegedly, I think it's more to like the changing luminosity, and like it might does it move a little bit? I mean, maybe. It's like it's hard to tell because with the naked eye it will look invisible. It takes a very high powered telescope or pair of binoculars to really notice that movement. So go ahead, sorry.
There's a place called Coral Castle right down the street from where I live in Homestead, Florida.
Very Masonic.
Yeah, CC. And they have a big, tall rock tower type of thing there's actually two vertical rock plates. They're very tall, and they each have holes in them. The holes are aligned to be able to see Polaris through them. Polaris is the North Star for people that don't know. Mm-hmm. And there's also a little cross with string on like the second hole. And the movement, Polaris goes from one quadrant to another, to another, to another every season. And that little device is a way to tell the seasons based on Polaris. But yeah, I keep hearing that it doesn't move, but I also see evidence that it does move a little bit, but just around like the center point of this axis mundi, like the center point of the sky.
That's great. And honestly, then it probably does move a little bit. But on a night-to-night basis, everything revolves around Polaris. And if Polaris moves like on its very small axis going that makes perfect sense seasonally. And perhaps, like the firmament or the stars shift with it that little bit, just that little smidge. And that, maybe that's how it keeps its tandem with the sun, keeps to be in sync with the sun.
But in general, like with what you're saying, Polaris, the North Star, is the brightest, and everything revolves around it. So it's as close to, what would that latitude line be? 90 degrees north as any other star.
Yeah. And it's like you said, it's always directly north. And then what's beautiful is the Big Dipper is always pointing at Polaris. The lead stars of the Big Dipper, Dubhe and Merak, they are always pointing at the Big Dipper. The Big Dipper is going to circle around like this, and then Polaris is going to stay roughly still on a night-to-night basis. It doesn't move that much, but over the seasons, it will definitely go from one quadrant to the other within its little bounds, essentially. But these lead stars, Dubhe and Merak, always point at Polaris, which is cool. That's the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper, and talk about intelligent design. And again, this goes against the whole outer space narrative, because look at these two constellations. They freaking look exactly the same, and the one is always pointing at the other, and the part that it's always pointing at is the one star in the sky that pretty much just sits still and everything else rotates around. And they both, going back to the number 7, they both have 7 stars. And going back to decans, these are both decans of Cancer. The Big Bear and the Little Bear, the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper, are decans of this sign, Cancer. And what's cool about Cancer and Polaris and everything is that's the north, and north is an anagram for throne. You take those letters, you mix them around, you have Thron. So it's literally the throne of God. So yeah, in my opinion, everything makes more sense on a geocentric, thinking of things geocentrically, because like, how could we be wobbling and tilting and spinning and orbiting, and yet these stars are always pointing at the one star that doesn't move as we tilt? And at the same time, like I said way earlier, Mintaka, the lead star of Orion's belt, is pretty much always right on the equator. So those things just don't add up. And I'm not even going into like the big proofs of geocentrism and like what it really is, So what woke me up was just having someone who I respected and was intelligent go like, yeah, bro, it just is what it is. And I was like, you're not going to fight about it. It just is what it is. I really, really respect that a lot. And it's changed my life completely, because I used to not care about astrology at all. I grew up like, it goes back to the deceptions, right? Like, what deceptions did we learn in childhood? We learned the food pyramid. That was bogus. On that
Santa, which has to do with the North Pole.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, Santa's so cool, Santa, not true, but spiritually and metaphorically, Santa is the chrism, the oil going down your spinal column, going down the chimney. That's the true Santa story, right? So yeah, the truths, the myths, truths of or the untruths of childhood, like the food pyramid, the wars are fought because we're the good guys, all that stuff. Like, there are so many lies. And then what's another lie we were told as kids? Oh, astrology, that's a pseudoscience. That's stupid. That's for idiots. Idiots who think the stars have any effect on us. When you start unlearning in the school of unlearning these different things, like all of these childhood lies, it turns out that the opposite is true. And Heliocentrism and geocentrism play into that, and the validity of astrology completely plays into that.
Yeah,
So,
brother.
yes, sir. May I ask, Seth,
Yeah.
what turned you on to geocentrism?
So it was a friend of mine who kept bugging me about it. Actually, I was already in the conspiracy circles. The first big conspiracy that I woke up to was 9/11. I was 14 years old. I was in high school. I eventually saw Zeitgeist and I was in the rabbit hole. But I guess following some truth speakers, they were talking about FE. They were talking about not spinning. They were talking about all this other
Yeah.
stuff. And I would reply and defend the globe. I was like such a big glober. I was like, no, you're being deceived. Da, 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 da. So, and then it wasn't until my friend sent me videos. Hey man, check this out. Check this out. And I'm pretty sure it was a Santos Bonacci video that made me go, holy crap, because he is fluent in astrology. He's a total expert in astrotheology. I mean, that's his YouTube channel, Mr. Astrotheology. Totally fluent and expert in the cosmos and in the movement of the lights, the luminaries, the heavens. And it just started making sense. I started seeing the Earth as a clock. Well, not the Earth necessarily, but our enclosed system. And then once you learn about the moon landing, the alleged moon landing, that really takes a lot of steam out of the outer space narrative. And I think that's a great gateway drug for a lot of people. And I actually know a lot of people who go, well, I know the moon landing was fake, but we still live on a globe and you could probably still go to the moon if you wanted to. And I'm like, okay, cool. We're like halfway there. So for me, I guess it was just a couple of those things. A friend of mine really bugging me about it, not in an annoying way. He just kept gently asking me the good questions. You know what I mean? And so he was a good Socratic teacher. And yeah, eventually I had to deal with the cognitive dissonance of maybe I was wrong my whole life. Maybe I was defending these false beliefs. And that sucks. I think that prevents a lot of people from getting into truth seeking, is because you have to then admit that you've been deceived and you believed lies for some things. I'm not saying everything in the world is a lie, but a lot of it is. So yeah, that was kind of the beginning of my journey. And at this point, I really want to start teaching the deception. And so on that note, what is one of your favorite, you told me a lot of deceptions, but what's your favorite globe refutation? Like something that can actually, if you wrap your mind around the physics of it, look at it and say, well, we can't live on a globe with that being true. So what's one of your favorite refutations that takes the wind out of the sails of Neil deGrasse Tyson?
Sure. If I may, I'll say my two favorites. And then if I may, I'll say the technical best, if that's cool.
Yeah.
So my favorite, and this is what got me, and that's what's so funny, is some people say that, oh, I studied it for so long and then I got it. I saw this and I was like, Houston, we got a problem. Boats coming back over the horizon, right? Because we always learned that when boats go over the horizon, that's them going over the curvature of Earth. But then if you can zoom back in and then they come back into sight, well, then clearly the horizon is not the curvature of Earth, but rather just the limit of your vision. You know, it's an apparent horizon. And then you get stupid questions like, oh, well, if we live on a geocentric plane, why can't I see the Statue of Liberty from England? And it's like, bro, do you think you can see forever? That's a wild claim. Like, do you think you have infinite vision? You're wearing glasses. You got infinite vision and you're wearing glasses? That's crazy. So like that one just gets me. And then they'll say, oh no, but when you zoom back in, that's just refraction. Okay, cool. What is a scientific experiment that proves that that is refraction? Oh, there's none. It's just a belief. Sorry, bucko. The buck stops there. And then the other one is my other favorite that got me quick is just high altitude balloon footage. Just no visible curvature from high altitude. Those two things I find to be so simple. Boats come back over the horizon, you go up, there's no curve. We have huge problems, genuinely huge problems. Everything else, like, oh, well, then why do things fall down Well, then you realize that buoyancy and density makes more sense than mass attracting mass, because again, what scientific experiment proves that mass attracts mass? Oh,
There is
none?
none whatsoever.
Whoa. So those are huge problems. But I do have to say, out of intellectual honesty.
Wait, let's pause right
Sorry.
there.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Because I just want to show a video of what you just mentioned. You mentioned high altitude footage. This
Sure
is
can.
just
Yeah.
footage out of a window of a plane. Now, let's say it's 35,000 feet, 5 miles up. What a lot of people are going to try to do is measure the curve left to right. But that's not what you want to do. What you want to do is just look straight ahead. And you can do this in a plane. This is what anyone can test. Next time you are in a plane, get a window seat. Look out the window when you're at cruising altitude. Just look out the window straight. Don't look up, don't look down, and ask yourself, where's the horizon? If the horizon is at eye level, meaning you don't have to look down for it, that means there is absolutely zero downward curvature away from you. So my suggestion to people wanting to test this is don't look for the curvature left to right. Look for it in front of you, because it should be going down at an equal rate around all sides. You should be able to see the horizon lower, not at eye level, if we truly live on a globe. So that's one. And another one that's going to illustrate that will be this one. This is an ascending camera that shows you a physical fact about Earth, which is that the horizon is always at eye level, no matter how high you go. And this plays right into the high altitude footage. Horizon is going to be at eye level, meaning you don't have to look down, you don't have to look up. It's going to be right here in the middle of your vision, no matter how high you go. You can stand on a beach, you can stand on the 20th floor of a skyscraper, you can stand on a 100th floor, you can go 5 miles in an airplane, and you can go up 120,000 feet to the highest, ascent that an amateur person can go, roughly. And you will see the horizon right there, eye level. So check this video out. As you ascend, the horizon ascends with you. And this is proof positive, if the laws of physics are standard and unchanging, of a level plane. And now this isn't a proof, but what are the first 5 letters of planet spell?
Plane. Absolutely.
Exactly. Right.
Yep.
So really just wanted to hammer that home with a visual. And then you were about to go off on your favorite, most technical refutation of the globe.
Yeah, and there's a gentleman named Nathan Oakley who is I would call him a very prominent geocentrist, and he makes the argument, and it's just true, that it's measured level. It just is. Earth is measured level. A mile is level. Any measurement, like how you have a ruler that's a foot, that's level. There's no curvature in a foot. A mile is the same thing. There's no curvature in a mile. So every measurement that we make for Earth is de facto level. And that alone proves it. And like, again, that's not my favorite one because it's so, I don't know. It is true, but I feel like it's harder to sell than the visuals, is why I would never lead with that one personally. But if you want to go just like on raw, like you're just going head to head raw facts alone, you can never refute that it is measured level. It just is what it is. If there's any curvature, it's applied by calculations after physical measurement. It's never measured with curvature, and there is no curvature to measure. It's literally impossible. Seth showed you a video of an airplane. It's called an airplane. It's not an air curver. It's not an airbender. It's not Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's an airplane because they plane in the air. Once they hit that altitude of cruising, they are going to remain level until they go to descend, at which case they will go down. But otherwise, they're going level, man. And you'll hear these arguments like, oh, 8 inches per mile squared, because again, if you want to live on a ball, that ball must have curvature. And then you'll hear geocentrists claim, oh, well, the curvature rate should be 8 inches per mile squared. And then you'll have the anti the globe Earth defenders and the anti-geocentrists go, oh, well, that formula is for a hyperbola. True, it is for a hyperbola. However, 8 inches per mile squared is 99% accurate or more for the first 1,000 miles. So if we debate over 1,000 miles, then call me wrong. But if we have 1,000 level miles, you've got a problem with the globe. It just is what it is. There's no way around it. There has to be curvature. Oh, the salt flats, dude. The salt flats.
So,
Beautiful. Go ahead. This is so beautiful.
well, this is a visual representation of what you're just talking about, how there's levelness to all areas. And this picture proves it, because you're only going to get a perfect mirror reflection of those clouds, meaning the clouds look the same size as they do in the reflection as they do in the sky. You're only going to get that if you're dealing with a perfectly flat surface. As soon as any element or degree of convexity or concavity makes its way into a reflective surface, and you can test this with a spoon. Look at the concave side of a spoon, and the image is actually flipped upside down. Look at the convex side of a spoon, and the image is grossly warped. So any degree of convexity of a reflective mirror surface will distort the reflection. Since we have zero distortion, this is a perfect mirror, perfect size. You have a little bit of blurriness, but it's a perfect mirror reflection. That's a level surface. So my question for heliocentrist globe believers is, how many flat surfaces does it take to make a sphere? And then they short circuit on that one, man. They don't know how to answer that.
Because there's no answer. There's no answer, which is why these debates go sideways so quick, which is why I don't recommend debating it or getting involved in the whole debate. Again, if you want to, God bless, you or anyone listening, it is fun to debate for a while. But I mean, if you get really into it, it gets really ugly, because the people who are anti-geocentrist are some of the most rabid, hateful people I have ever encountered, which is funny because when I talk about this in real life to friends, coworkers, and family, there may be like, oh, I don't buy it, but there's never like anyone calling me stupid or, getting really hateful, whereas online, man, like there's dangerous waters out there, folks. So proceed with caution, at least my humble opinion, and I'm out here showing my face, and Seth's out here only showing his face. I can't speak for Seth. I'll speak for myself because I find it to be so important. You mentioned the moon landing earlier, the moon landing, in my opinion, again, people need to realize that this concept of Earth, the debate between geocentrism and heliocentrism is not a new. It's not like some crazy people were like, oh, we think it's geocentric for no reason. It's been a raging debate for a long, long, long time, and it's the heliocentrists really only won recently. It's not like it was the overarching or dominant dogma for more than the last few hundred years at most. Uranus, discovered as an outer planet, really got the ball rolling, so to speak. And again, I have a book written on the discovery of the outer planets that I'm finishing up, and they are questionable in my humble opinion. But let's not even get into that. Let's leave that alone for now. But the point I'm getting at, what point was I getting at? I'm sorry. It's dangerous out there. Oh, it matters so much to me because the moon landing, it's the world has gone to crap since the moon landing. Not like it was perfect before, but rampant atheism, drug use, nihilism, depression, the destruction of the family unit all coincides with adaptation of heliocentrism. We literally live on God's green earth, but we've been psyoped into thinking that we are on some insignificant, infinitesimal blue marble, when that's not the case at all, So that's why I really care so much about this, and that's why I'm willing to risk whatever, is because like I said earlier, it truly brings me to God. And I know in my heart that this isn't the end. So with my time here, I really have to make it count, as Bob Dylan says in this, I love bringing this up, this song, All Along the Watchtower, let us not talk falsely now, for the hour is growing late. There's no time to be a coward in this life, in my humble opinion. Like, at least for me, it's time for me to put myself out there. So yeah, that's why I really, really care about it, because God's undeniably real.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing it. Even though, like you said, bro, it's risky. Like, you become hated and you become ridiculed and, seen as a dumbass, as a fool, as a total anti-science, dangerous person, when we're trying to be as scientific as possible. Science is that which can be replicated, and science is that which works and is true. So when we have a better model that explains what we see, that is actually replicable, that is true, that shows true results, we're just going to go with that. That's the scientific view, in my opinion. So thanks for being here, Merlin, and helping us just make a little sense of it. I just brought this image up too because it's a good representation. I think a lot of the reason why people can't get on board with geocentrism is they don't understand what it looks like. They just don't understand the model. We've been force-fed the heliocentric model and the globe model for so long, ever since we could remember. You're a baby looking up at the mobile above you, and it's the planets, and it's reinforcing this solar system that they teach you in school. And then obviously kindergarten, day one, you got the globe and you just have the space programming. All the movies, every time you watch a movie that's produced by Universal Pictures, you see that globe spinning, which, by the way, Universal Pictures made that image before the alleged moon landing. And so how do they even know what the Earth looked like from that far away? Turns out they were totally right in their estimation. No. So anyways, what I'm trying to say is we're just programmed so hard with the globe, with this one idea, that we just need to start putting more images out there that reflect the other model. So this isn't the most accurate image of where we live, because I can't see that far. I can't go up there. We aren't allowed to go to the North Pole. We aren't allowed to go to Antarctica. This is our best estimation, but this is what it looks like, people. That yellow dot is the sun. This screenshot is labeled March because the yellow dot is above the red line, which is the equator. North is the middle of this circle. And now, again, this is an above view of where we live. There's the bird's eye view. North Pole is the center. South is anything away from the center. East is a circle. Kind of interesting how a clock turns clockwise, the same exact way the luminaries do, the sun does. And now the sun, this is what people don't understand, and this will help you explain the seasons. The sun oscillates. Obviously, it spins around us once per day, giving us the day and the night. But it also, we talked about this earlier in the show, but now you get the visual. It makes a tight circle above the Tropic of Cancer in the northern summer, Cancer season. And then the circle gets wider. So the sun is doing this. It's doing a tight circle, medium circle in the spring, a big circle in the winter, northern hemisphere style, medium circle on the equinox again, and a tight circle in the northern summer. It explains everything perfectly. So just wanted to give you guys a little visual there. Anything you want to add to that piece, Merlin?
If I may, yeah. So going back to the directions, the word north, as I mentioned earlier, is an anagram for throne. So, and this is why I wanted to bring up the tropical astrology, right? So like I said earlier, why do the planets behave differently when they move north to south? And this is the number one refutation of Vedic astrology, because north to south is going toward the center or away from the center, whereas east to west is nothing. It's just going around the circle. It's just a relative point that changes every 24 hours anyway. So like literally, what does the east to west slippage matter when compared to north to south, to the center, from the center? So yeah, north is an anagram for the word throne. The word south, take out the S, take out the H, it's out. You go outward to go south. It's literally in the word. You're going outward to go south. East it comes from AUST, ost. That's east, oust. And AU is the chemical symbol for gold, and east is about where the sun rises. So the gold comes from the east, and west is the word vesper, which is the setting. So that's the setting sun, the west, the vesp. And that is associated with death because the sun dies in the west every day. The sun is reborn in the east, it dies in the west. And this is a total random tangent, but a lot of truthers have taken to saying grand rising. Have you heard the whole grand rising rather than good morning?
It cracks me
Guys,
up.
the morning, who owns the sun? God owns the sun. So every night the sun dies and we are in mourning because the sun is dead. It's sad. It's dark. We have to worry about wild beasts. We got to have our hearth and our campfire. And then we're still in mourning when the sun rises the next day and is reborn. So our mourning is a good morning. It's literally astrotheology is the word good morning. So grand rising is a lot like the 13 moon calendar, where it's just an innocent misconception of what's actually going on.
Dude, total mic drop. Thank you for explaining that. I love that because I have a lot of friends who will not say good morning anymore, and I make sure to say it to them. You know,
Yeah, dude.
I have not abandoned good morning. I have seen no problem with it.
It's literally about
Awesome.
the sun dying, man. It's I feel the same way because some people do it. It's like you're a good person and I love you, but I just don't vibe with grand rising. I just don't, you know? So yeah.
Yeah. Plus, we don't think the sun actually rises in altitude. It only appears to based on perspective and distance.
Exactly.
I feel like bringing up one more globe refutation, and then maybe we can wrap it up because we have had a great show already so far. And dude, you dropped a lot of gravy. It's been an amazing conversation. But yeah, what do you think about one more globe refutation?
I've got all the time in the world, all the time on this level, beautiful earth.
Okay, here it is. Let me pull this one up. This one really gets me.
And that's what's beautiful about globe refutations is because it's false, there are literally infinite ways to prove it false. And like because it's level, there are infinitely ways to prove that the level part is true. Like it's so funny. It's the globe is Swiss cheese. There's a million holes in this thing. It's really bad. So what
Yeah.
have we got here?
Well, actually, let me pop this one up first. They say we're spinning. They say we're on a rock that is roughly spherical. Some people will say it's an oblate spheroid. Who cares? It's shaped like a sphere. That's what they tell us. They tell us it's spinning once per day, and they say that the equator is 24,000 miles. Well, there's 24 hours in a day, so that conveniently makes the equator moving relative to space at a speed of 1,000 miles per hour. Okay, and then I just want you to imagine a ball that's got a bunch of 70% water on the outside. And if you spun it, you threw it in the air and spun it, well, just like in this image, the water would fling off the sides of it. It would fling most strongly off the direct sides farthest from the axis. So the equator. So the equator allegedly spins relative to space at 1,000 miles per hour, but the North Pole isn't spinning that long because you don't have a 24,000 mile equator at the North Pole. It still rotates once per day, but the distance, the length of the latitude line that is 89 degrees north, right around the North Pole, is extremely small. I don't know the exact measurement of that particular line of latitude, but it's going to be effectively 10, 20 miles. So now you're spinning at a rate of, way, way, way less than 1,000 miles per hour. How do you reconcile the difference in spin? And that's where this other image comes in handy. If we were spinning, people on the equator should be lighter because of centrifugal force. Centrifugal force is a physical phenomena that exists with all rotating objects. It's the apparent outward force of a rotating object. And so my question for globe believers is, does centrifugal force apply on the globe? Now, the scientists tell you yes. But what they can't account for is the difference in centrifugal force between the equator and Scandinavia, okay, or the North Pole. Not only is the speed of spin different, but the angle at which you're standing relative to that spinning object is completely different. So you're going to be flung off differently. And this just makes absolutely no sense. People do make the argument, you just can't feel the spin because we're locked to our atmosphere, or the atmosphere is locked to the globe. And it's similar to as if you're riding in an airplane. You can juggle balls in an airplane. You can, throw something up and you'll catch it. It won't go behind you because everything's moving together. And to that I respond, yes, when you're moving in a straight line. There's no problem with that when you're moving in a straight line. But as soon as you introduce torque, turn, rotation, you now have to contend with centrifugal force, which is the apparent outward force. It ejects you away. Think of a centrifuge. You spin blood vials to separate the dense fats or lipids in the blood from the hemoglobin, whatever. That's a centrifuge. It uses outward force of a spinning object to separate things. So this is one of my favorite head scratchers of the globe, where you just ask a glober, okay, so does centrifugal force apply? And then they'll either say yes or no. And if it's no, then why not? And if it's yes, then how do you account for the difference in centrifugal force between these two lines of latitude? And you can also look at the equation for weight on Earth. They say it's basically your mass due to gravity minus the centrifugal force. They say that's how simple the equation is, yet when you plug in the numbers, it all falls apart. So spin, you could try to test spin anyway and you'll never prove it. So I had to bring that one up. Spin is one of my favorites. Does centrifugal force apply? Why don't we feel it?
Yeah, the orbits are great to get into. Another one that's very similar is like, why don't we feel, we're traveling around the sun, yet we don't feel it, right? And it's said that, we're traveling at a uniform rate of velocity, the speed, a constant speed. The speed doesn't change. And yet we have an elliptical orbit around the sun. So if you ask like a chat GPT or any scientist, our speed is constant. That's how we don't feel the change, okay? But then we have an elliptical orbit. Can elliptical orbits have a constant speed? No. Elliptical orbits necessitate a change in speed. So that's another one where it's just like the orbits are fun to get into. It's just complete nonsense, and there's just a billion different ways to tear this whole thing apart, which is one of the funny things about it. Just thinking about it from a conspiracy theory point of view, like, you mentioned 9/11. That's how I got into conspiracy theories as well. I think I was in 8th grade in 9/11. I remember it well, where I was. I'm sure you do too. You remember that kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like with 9/11, the truth, what we think happened, was it Lucky Larry and the boys over in the desert? Was it an inside job a little bit? Was it this? Was it that? That's all conjecture at the end of the day. You look into World War II, those conspiracy theories, it's all conjecture. You look into pretty much any conspiracy theory, and while a lot of stuff does really lend credence toward the conspiracy theory, at the end of the day, it is conjecture. With the nature of Earth, though, it's provable. It's literally, it's the most maligned and simultaneously provable conspiracy theory there is, which makes it so funny, and like people ask the question, there's no way everyone's in on the lie. Very few people are in on the lie. Most people at NASA, 99%, think they are on a spinning ball. The ones closest to the devil are the one that the devil has the least respect for and hates the most. That's why Saturn hates Mars so much, because like the devil's like, really? You'd work for me? You'd work for me? You're that low that you would work for me? You're that easily deceived and I'm gonna do good by you? That is, in my opinion, the devil's mindset, and that is how this deception is really carried out. Is it just gets the most fervent believers. A great metaphor that someone else used is like how they get dogs to they train police dogs, right? And what they do is they get the police dog with the highest drive for the job, the most aggressive dogs. So to pick the people who are going to be astronauts or working at NASA, they get the people who, it was my dream. Since I was a child, I wanted to be an astronaut. The ones who are obsessed with outer space, who don't question it at all. It's their dogma, it's their life, it's their everything. Sorry, we got a new image up here. What do we got here?
This is the Chicago skyline over Lake Michigan from Grand Mere State Park, and it's 50 miles. And according to globe math, it should be completely obstructed, the skyline, by the bulge. And so this image was actually featured on like a news story one time where I think it was a meteorologist, like a weatherman. He was trying to say that this was refraction. And it's like, oh, so you can just perfectly take anything that's obstructed behind a view and just refract it back up perfectly. It's a convenient way to whisk away the fact that we live on a level plane and that you can just simply see Chicago from 50 miles away. Every 70 miles, you should have a 1 degree arc, because 24,000 divided by 360 is 69 or 70. So it's roughly 70 miles. You should have 1 degree of curvature. And the Earth being as big as it is, that 1 degree of curvature should completely obstruct anything 50 miles away. It should obstruct most things 20 miles away. So this is something you can test yourself with a laser, with a nice camera. You do have to have a good lens. Joshua Nowicki is the photographer who took this photo. I'm not sure if he used a Nikon P900, but I think it's discontinued, but that's a camera that a lot of the truthers like to get because it has a super high powered zoom lens on it.
Dude, Nikon got a NASA contract and then months later discontinued that camera after getting a NASA contract. So like, yeah, they nicknamed that camera the Globe Buster. And then it was doing too good of a job, and they had to take it off the shelves and discontinue it. So you can still buy them on eBay and stuff, but they're more difficult to get now, and the price is rising. So yeah. Amazing. And that's again such a good example of another illusion that you have to believe, right? The moon's rotating, you just can't see it. The sun and moon are the same size, but it just looks like they are. You can see too far, but it's just refraction. And what is the scientific experiment that proves that refraction allows you to see too far? This is it. So the observation is the experiment, because otherwise it would disprove their entire worldview. Therefore, this experiment proves that it's refraction. It doesn't make any sense. It's nonsensical. It's really bad. So yeah.
Yeah. And I really like how you said that the truth basically defends itself. All we have to do is open our eyes and wrap our minds around the implications of the salt flats, the reflections of the clouds, the horizon always rising to eye level, being able to see 50 miles across the water, not being able to test for gravity or spin or any of that nonsense. You really just have to put on your big boy pants and hat and say, okay, I'm going to test this objectively, not bring my wants into this. I didn't want to be a geocentrist. I just want truth. And that's where it led me. So I like how you said, it's just there. It defends itself. We don't have to do all these fancy games. And that was going to lead me to one last question. I can't remember what it is right now. It's been a good talk, dude.
It has been a great talk, man, dude. Thank you. Honestly, like, I really appreciate this. This is really cool, and again, your channel is incredible. And the connection between natural health and geocentrism is one that is just there, because the longer that I'm not sure how long you've been. Oh, you got your question?
I do. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, bro.
Thought, though?
I mean, just I don't know how long you've been a geocentrist, but like, the longer I'm in the game, so to speak, the more people I meet who are just on the same wavelength. Like, I love the expression, your vibe is your tribe. It's a very holistic thing. It's so natural, like you said earlier. It's so natural, and what's funny about geocentrism it's great news. You know what I mean? Like, we're not on a ball hurling through a vacuum. I sleep soundly every night knowing that a meteor will not come and destroy the entire earth, you know? Like, and I sleep soundly because it just brings you so close to God. You know, like, are there different conceptions of God? Sure. But it's very difficult to be an atheist. It's typical that you're a theist of some sort when you learn this stuff, at least my humble opinion.
I totally agree, man. That was my last question, which is basically why the lie? Why are they hiding the reality? And then what do you regain from seeing the reality for what it is? And I think you just expressed it is you find God again. You see that this place is a beautiful creation, that it wasn't a random accident. We're not hurling through space based on a mistake, random chaos, billions of years of random evolution that has no purpose. This is my answer. Why the lie is effectively to hide God, effectively to trap you and to trap your mind and actually warp your mind around a non-real thing. And if you don't know where you are, you'll probably believe anything. And then what we gain from this truth is a deeper connection to God. That's my opinion. But why don't you, this will be the last question of the night. Why the lie? And what do you gain from just seeing the world as it is?
That's such a good question. And I think about that often because I think about, the players, the Illuminati families or whatever they are, the Rothschilds, all these people who probably know, like in Antarctica, there you have Rothschild Island, and then right next to Rothschild Island is an island called Deception Island. So that's not here. That just is what it is. And I wonder, like, if these people know that God is real, why would they do that? Because I wonder what they gain from this. It's like, bro, if you're deceiving the world, who am I to know what God thinks of that? But I would assume he doesn't smile kindly on that. Or does it give us, the average person, does it make us stronger? Because we're born under these tough circumstances. Like we think, oh, the world's so soft these days, like, oh, we have it so easy. We've got all these modern conveniences, which is true, but there are tough things too. They're trying to jab you, they're trying to poison you, body, mind, and soul. So, like, if you're able to overcome those obstacles and like why it's part, because again, in my opinion, everything's part of God's plan. God gave us free will, but God also knows how it's all going to end, I think, and we have our little roles to play along the way, I think. But like, think about how much stronger we are. Like, we came, like, I assume you weren't born vegan, and yet you found the healthy diet. My family is all meat eaters, and I've turned vegetarian. We were both indoctrinated so thoroughly, probably jabbed when we were younger, as many of the listeners are. And we've all overcome these struggles and obstacles, and we're stronger for it. So, like, no, we're not surviving in the wild against wolves for the most part, but we do have the modern perils to contend with, which, man, they're rough. Like, they're genuine. They can be rough. It's tough out there. So, yeah, I really, what you gain from it is a closer connection to God, the satisfaction. I don't know. Would I say the satisfaction of being right? That's such a low way to put it. Because, like, at the end of the day, like, everybody loves being right.
Yeah, but
Um,
the alignment with truth does give you something. It's more than satisfaction. It's almost like peace, where you're now aligned and there's no dissonance anymore.
100%. Yeah, it's just an alignment with, in my opinion, and that's why I love astrology so much, is like, I think God put the stars there to guide us, for signs and for seasons. And what's so funny is the word sign has different meanings, right? You have sign like the sine wave, but also a sign like, hey, this way, dummy, So it's like, follow this, use this as a guide. And then seasons, you have the seasons of the year, but then also seasoning, like you season your food and it tastes different. And I would equate that back to the luminaries perturbing the ether, right? They literally, by affecting the ether, they season us and season the world, quite literally. So it's like for signs and for seasons, and it just is what it is. But yeah, the whole thing is it just brings, for me, it has done nothing but bring me closer to God. And speaking to so many other geocentrists, it's brought us closer to God, and in a healthy way too, not in a zealous, like militant way. There are so many geocentrists who are like pacifist vegan yogis. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's not a harmful thing. And like I said earlier, it's the best news ever. You are special. You were put here for a reason. There's no random chance. We weren't, some big bang accident. We all have a purpose, which is incredible, and I'm so grateful to God for it. I thank God every day for the life I was given and the struggles I have to go through, because it's all for a purpose, all to make me stronger. I think it's true for all of us.
Wow. Brilliantly said. Dude, thank you so much. And I just want to add one thing to that. What we gain from seeing the world as it is and dropping some of the deceptions is, I think a lot of people listening are going to say, yeah, when I was a child in school and I was told this thing about space, it didn't make sense to me, but I wasn't in a position to question it. And everyone seemed to agree. So I just made that my belief. You're going to realize that you were not wrong in that moment, potentially. If you had a thought about, well, I don't feel like we're spinning, so how does that make sense? You learn that your instinct is actually kind of on point. And anything that you questioned from before might have actually led you to the truth if you just followed that thread, if your teachers allowed you to follow that thread, if the people around you allowed you to follow these realities to their conclusion. And not that everything has to be concluded. I think everything's an ongoing study. So, on that note and in that spirit, Merlin, I thank you for participating in this ongoing study of the natural world. This was, I think, my first show I've done on astrology, cosmology, and the earth. But I think it's so important to holistic health, because if all we're believing is deception and lies, then we're not healthy. We're so off balance. In my study of natural hygiene, which is one of my preferred health modalities, it simply means natural health, trying to be healthy the natural way. Our main mission is to align with nature, to be more like nature. It doesn't mean to live naked under a rock or like in a cave. Humans are amazing, adaptable, smart, resourceful creatures, and we can still do human things, but just live more in alignment with nature. I think studying the planets does that, studying the stars, studying the sun and the moon, studying our physical terrain, our beautiful, stationary, level plane that we live on. It is such a beautiful thing. It brings me closer to God as well. And yeah, on that note, Merlin, thanks again, brother.
Thanks, Seth. I really appreciate it, man. This is a great conversation.
You got a website or anything? Do you do astrology readings? How can people get a hold of you?
I am launching a website soon, within the next month. I will be doing astrology readings. I don't yet. I've got a lot of experience. I used to on a different platform besides YouTube and a website, and I developed plenty in real life. But right now, my channel on YouTube is at Wise Wizard Merlin, and that's Wize. If you want to find me there. If you love astrology and love geocentrism, you might like my channel. And I have an Instagram account with like 3 followers, but I do have an Instagram account that's the same thing, at Wise Wizard Merlin. And it will eventually be wisewizardmerlin.com once that website launches. So yeah.
Cool. Well, everybody stay tuned. Go run his numbers up on the IG, on the YouTube. Give this video a like and comment down below what you think. Stay tuned for the next episode, guys. Much love. Peace be with you. God bless. And thanks again to my guest, Mr. Wise Wizard Merlin.
Bro, if space is expanding, what is space expanding into? Like if there's an edge, like it can't be a wall. Like if it's infinite, it's infinite already. It can't be expanding like what's on the other side of the wall? What do you mean it's like expanding and infinite? That's a paradox. That makes no sense. I was like, if you could travel instantly to the end, what would be there? I always thought that, you know? So yeah, man. There's always something, bro. You gotta trust your intuition because God gave it to you for a reason.
Woo!